you so much. I am going to share my screen if I can. Hang just one moment, please. And we're going to start talking, if that's okay with all of you. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. It's also a pleasure to see all of our pre-pandemic photos pop up on the screen because I forgot what I looked like about a year and a half ago. So it's lovely to see that. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to speak to all of you and to hear from you as well. And it's really nice. I had that privilege of being able to speak in person at Hill Learning Center, and I felt so at home and so welcomed. I do hope to be able to come back soon, but this is the next best thing. So what I want to do is start out this evening with a question for all of you. And then we'll do a little activity. And I want to have you answer that question by dropping something to the chat box, raising your virtual hand, or just sort of thinking it through. So we're going to start with this question. How have you dealt with adversity this year? I'll give everybody a minute to just sort of think that one through. Pop any thoughts you have into the chat. I see some really good answers coming in too. And I think they're very resonant with a lot of us. And I want everybody to be able to see what this year has been like. And in part because I'd be really surprised if anybody said they haven't faced any adversity in the past year, 13 months. And if you did, it might be because you thought somebody else's year has been harder or because your year wasn't that bad. And I just want all of us to go into this evening remembering that everybody's experience is valid. You never know what anybody else is going through. And there is no limited pool of having a hard time. So if you say you or your child or your students have had one, it doesn't take the option away from anybody else. So the second thing I want to do is an activity to take a minute to ground ourselves right here in this moment, in this evening. For many of us, it's been a really long day and a series of really long days. And if you can remember what day it is, you may be a little bit ahead of me. So let's take a minute to sort of ground ourselves and get regulated. And we're going to do that by breathing with this. And this is one of my favorite images. I have it on my desktop of my computer and I use it daily. And you have the link to it too in the handout. So when it comes back down, we're going to take a minute to just breathe with this image. I should have timed that better. Okay. We're going to breathe in. Breathe out. Do it again. In. And out. And one last time. And if you're like me, you feel a little bit calmer right now. Just those 3 deep breaths is a way to get yourself grounded, ready to do what you're going to do, and regulate a little bit. So now I'm ready to have a conversation with you. And I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. Beth did some of that. As she said, I'm the Associate Director of Thought Leadership and Expertise at Understood, a former classroom teacher. I was an early intervention specialist. I'm the mom to 3. I have a 25-year-old. She's actually 24, but will be 25 next week. So I'm practicing saying 25. I have an 18-year-old and an 11-year-old. They're all neurodiverse, and any stories I tell about them, I have permission to share. And I also just want to share some that I also learned differently. So this is personal, professional, sort of my whole life. I'm the author of a number of books, and 2 of them were released during this pandemic. The 2 you see on the screen. And interestingly enough, of the books I've written, I think these 2 are the most appropriate to have come into the world during a pandemic, because I think the need for empathy and the need for adulting skills are the 2 things that really directly our ability to feel resilient. So what does the word resilience mean to you? Let's see if we can get some answers about what does resilience mean to you? And again, if you want to drop your thoughts in the chat or just keep it in your brain, just think through, what does resilience mean to you? So I'm seeing some really good answers: rolling with the punches, not giving up, bouncing back, weathering the tough times, rebounding. They're coming in faster than I even tell you how quick these are great answers. And I think they're really good for everybody to see everybody else's answers. Now, for me, when I hear the word resilient, I see this picture of silly putty in my mind, which is why I have this picture here. I see this picture of silly putty sort of stretched almost to the point of breaking apart and sort of bouncing back with that elasticity that silly putty has. But even silly putty doesn't always bounce back. Sometimes it gets brittle and it breaks, and sometimes it stays so stretched out and just one long string of silly putty. And it depends on the conditions around it, right? So sometimes if you have the little egg that the silly putty stays in and you leave it open, the air gets to it and it gets really brittle and it's not able to bounce back. Or sometimes you've played with it so much that it's just gummy and it's not going to work, it's not going to bounce back. And resilience is the same way. It's not always about bouncing back, but it is about being able to face and get through adversity and having the skills, the purpose, and the reason to do that. So I want to start by saying what resilience isn't. And this image is so startling to me because it's the common image we are seeing daily. Our kids are putting on masks, we are putting on masks, and we are going on with our daily life in a way that we've never done before. We're being asked to be resilient in times that we have never faced before. We have no models for how to do this, and yet we're still doing it. And that's not because resilience is a fixed trait. It's not because it's something you have or you don't have. Resilience isn't always bouncing back. It may sometimes be bouncing back, but it's not always the ability to bounce back. Sometimes it's the ability to stay put. It's not pushing through and ignoring the adversity that comes your way. And it's not always moving forward. Like I said, sometimes it's about staying where you are and staying put and feeling okay with that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my resilience this year. My resilience has been challenged to the point where I just could not keep quiet in ways that I had before. So what you see on this slide is a screenshot. And by the way, the shirt says, "I meant to say it, just not out loud," which is one of my favorite shirts. And this is a screenshot of a piece that I wrote and published this year, published publicly. And it was one of the scariest things I have ever done. In this piece, and it's linked actually, so when you get the slides, it's linked in the slides and you can click through and read it. I disclosed about my own disability in a way I never had before. I talk pretty regularly about the fact that I'm neurodiverse. I learn and think differently. I have sensory processing issues that are sort of really troublesome in some circumstances. I have anxiety. But with the coronavirus, all of us are experiencing loss of some kind, and I felt the need to speak up even more. The common thread with this pandemic is we're all feeling this collective sense of loss and lack of control of our lives. And for me, that biggest loss was my ability to handle cognitive load. And that cognitive load is the ability to move information around quickly, multitask with precision. And my thoughts are still moving really quickly, but not as productively. And usually my brain sort of works like, I don't know, like a satellite overview of the world. You know, I see all the possibilities, the routes, the detours, the end destinations. I can juggle a number of, I can't talk, but I can juggle a number of projects at the same time and think about sort of multiple solutions to problems all at once. But something about this ongoing pandemic, all of the societal uncertainty and around it, made my brain sort of lose that GPS anchoring system. It's no longer like a GPS. And it's not in a way that meant I can't function, but it's in a way that scared me a little bit. And it's unrelenting. And I felt the need to speak up. And what I spoke up and said is, I do have an anxiety disorder. I do have sensory processing issues, but I also have obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's one of the reasons my thoughts are moving so fast. You may have heard of it called OCD. I've never talked about OCD before as one of the challenges I face because I've been scared. But the scared of feeling this loss and people not understanding why I wasn't quite myself was more important to me to speak up and tell people what was going on. So, of course, instead of just telling people at work, I decided it was necessary to tell the entire world. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why I did that. But in part, this quote by my friend and colleague, Ellen Broughton, sums up why I spoke up. She said, in reality, resilience is more like a repotted plant, slowly finding what it needs in the soil and growing more courageously into something more. And in order to feel resilient, I needed to find a way to grow. I needed people to understand how and why I was struggling, and to help them know it's okay to speak up without fear of more loss. And I will tell you, the response to that piece was extraordinary. It was surprising. I had more people reach out to me and say, thank you. I feel like I can speak up now. That loss is something I understand. The ability to not be myself has been something I really feel this year. And it was really important to me to be able to talk about that. And so here's my quote, which is so strange to put a quote of yourself on a slide, but I decided to do it anyway. And one of the reasons I did is because in this piece, I said that I realized, it's made me realize that there are losses that can leave a hole in your life. And then there are losses that can make you whole. And for me, the loss of worrying about being stigmatized is making me whole. So I guess you might be wondering, how does this all tie into resilience? What's the tie to resilience here? And the tie is the ability for me to speak up for what I need, the ability for me to tell people who I am, and the ability to ask for help when I really, really needed it. And I really needed it this year, as did the rest of my family, the people around me. And there's no shame in asking for help and saying I need support. And so that's the beginning of the conversation about resilience for me. And I want to talk to you about different ways people talk about resilience. Dr. Ken Ginsberg talks about the 7 C's of resilience. And I always remember this because it feels like you're sailing on the 7 C's to become a more resilient person. And what it is these C's of competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. And competence is about knowing how to handle stressful situations appropriately. And that's not always easy, especially when some of us are people who have difficulty with executive functioning, planning, prioritizing, strategizing, finding those coping skills. Some of our kids and our students are like that. And it's really difficult to feel competent. And when you can't feel competent, confidence becomes a problem. Confidence is in believing in your ability to handle those stressful situations or any situation that comes up. Connection is the idea of having close ties to other people that creates a sense of belonging. What I'm seeing here tonight, I'm seeing in the chat, I'm seeing in the fact that we have so many people listening and coming here and joining, is that you have connection. You have connection even though we're far apart from each other, even though we may not feel connected in the ways we usually have. There is connection here. Those close ties to other people that makes you feel like you belong somewhere. And a sense of belonging cannot be underrated, right? We all need to feel like we belong without question. So the next thing is an interesting one to me is character is an interesting kind of thing because character is something that develops over time. We don't always know who we are, and it evolves and it develops. Character is usually defined as having sort of this high sense of self-worth, knowing your values, knowing right from wrong, being caring towards others. And this is where I was talking about the adulting skills. The word adulting is kind of a funny word, but it just means growing up and getting to that point where you are really sort of starting to be in charge of your own life. And those are the kinds of things that build character, right? Knowing who you are, knowing what you stand for. We all may know right from wrong, but we may not always know what it is we stand for, what it is who we are at our very core. And knowing those things really help you build resilience. And then it helps you be more caring towards others and think through how your values match with them. Contribution is a great term. It means knowing that you have something to give to the world that's meaningful. And I think it's really important right now for all of us to remember that even though we may not be interacting with the entire world all the time, we have something that's meaningful. Being here tonight, putting into the chat your thoughts and sharing your thoughts with other people being in a virtual room together, we are contributing to everybody learning how to be more resilient and connected. So then there's coping, and coping is having a range of skills to handle challenges. And that one's much trickier than I think a lot of these other things. Excuse me. Coping skills can be positive or they can be negative. At the very beginning of this, we did that breathing exercise, and it was a way to get grounded and cope with sort of the stress and let go of the stress we may be feeling over the day. Some of our coping skills are less positive. Some of us might be stress eating. I will definitely put myself in that camp. Some of us may have coping skills like running and going for a run, which can be either positive or negative, depending on how you feel about running, I suppose. But it's having a range of skills to handle challenges. And then control is less about being in control of what's happening around you, but knowing that you have control over your actions and reactions. And to me, the reactions part is a really important part of this. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, I have an 11-year-old son. My 11-year-old has been home doing virtual school for a very long time now. It feels like forever, but I think it's only been about a year. And he is really struggling. He has ADHD. He's autistic, which is the word he prefers to use. He's really struggling with reactions. He has big, big feelings right now. And he is trying to figure out, where does he have control in his life? Because he doesn't feel like he has much control in his life. So we keep pointing out to him the things that he can control. What's within his control? Can he take a break when he needs to take a break? Can he talk to us when he needs something? Can he go ride his bike in, the yard? We're lucky enough to have an opportunity to live in a place where he can ride his bike and find his own way to sort of control his environment. And so that reaction piece is a big thing that we're thinking about right now with our own son. And I think it's something a lot of parents I'm talking to and a lot of teachers I'm talking to are seeing, that reactions are much bigger than they have been in the past. Another way to look at resilience is these 5 pillars of resilience. And the 5 pillars of resilience are self-awareness, which is the ability to tune into your own feelings, thoughts, and actions, and also recognizing how that affects yourself and others. That is a big, big thing to do. Self-awareness is tough, not always knowing what you're feeling, and things change from day to day. And right now we're all having sort of big feelings and small feelings and unexpected feelings, and they're clashing with other people's feelings. So the ability to tune into your own feelings, know what's yours and know what you're hearing from somebody else, and to separate them out, to really figure out how you need to move forward to make it through the day is important. So that piece of self-awareness and recognizing how you act affects you and others as well. The second pillar is mindfulness. I am really, really bad at this one. Mindfulness is living in the moment without judgment, so you can view your own thoughts in a more neutral way and keep your emotions in check. Mindfulness is often talked about being here right now. I am not as good at mindfulness as I'd really like to be. It's because I'm always thinking about the what ifs and what happens next and what else I could be doing. And I think that's a relatable feeling to many of us. Working from home this year has been really interesting for me because I'm always thinking about the dishes that could be done, the laundry that could be done, the math homework that needs to be helped with. But I also have my own things I need to be doing at the same time. The third pillar is self-care, and that is so important. We cannot underestimate self-care for ourselves, for our kids, for our students. Everybody needs to be able to meet the challenges of life with confidence and have the ability to function effectively. And sometimes that means taking a step back and saying, I need to do this for me. The fourth pillar is positive relationships, having people around us that we care for and who care for us. And then purpose. The fifth pillar of purpose is, again, recognizing that we belong to a community. The Hill community is a tremendous community to belong to. Our contributions matter daily. Everything we do in part of our community, the purpose, what gets you up in the morning, and what do you feel good about when you go to bed at night? So there are the 7 C's and the 5 pillars. And there's a lot of overlap between the 2 of them. And the overlap is about knowing yourself, having a strong connection to the people around you, feeling like you have something to give to the world, and having those skills you need to be resilient. That connection and need to feel meaningful and knowing myself is why I disclosed in that piece, is because I needed to know that I had something to contribute to the world. I knew what I needed from other people to make it through this, but I also knew what they needed from me, and that was honesty and vulnerability. And while the 7 C's and the 5 pillars are really good models, I also want to talk about what resilience really looks like for ourselves and our kids. Because having frameworks is fantastic, but until we can put those frameworks into real life situations, it can be really esoteric, really abstract, not knowing sort of what does that look like in real life. So we're going to talk about what does that look like? What are the signs of resilience? So one of the signs of resilience is being able to ask for help. And asking for help means that you or your child are coping with the difficulty and you feel motivated to get it right. I mentioned my 24, almost 25-year-old daughter. She lives on her own, which is what happens when they get to be that age. She lives on her own. She has an apartment. She has an apartment with friends. She works in a local grocery store. She also has anxiety, significant anxiety disorder, just like I do. She has problems with anxiety. Before the pandemic hit, she was doing really well. She was on top of her game. She loved what she was doing. She was going places with friends. She was working. And then the pandemic hit. And being a frontline worker was really overwhelming to her. She was really scared. She was frightened. She was in that place between being a new adult and having to do this all on her own. And she had a really, really hard time. She couldn't function. And like I said in the beginning, this is okay with her for me to tell this story because it's important to her that people learn from this story. Her name is Megan. Megan had a really difficult time and she would call me crying and crying and crying. Mom, I just can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to go to work. I feel like I can't breathe. She was really, really struggling. And what she needed to do was ask for help, not just from me, but from her doctors as well. And so we came up with a plan together because moms do that. And I helped her think through the words she could use because she didn't know what the words to use were. And she had a conversation with her doctor's office and they figured out medications that might help, but it wasn't enough. And she had to go back again and ask for more help. And she had to say, I really don't know how to handle the world right now. In the end, she ended up spending about a week inpatient at a hospital where she got the support she needed, learned the skills that she needed, and came out and was really much stronger for it. But that asking for help was really hard for her. Another sign of resilience is recognizing your strengths. Excuse me, it's hard to talk and I get very thirsty there. It can be hard to see your strengths when things aren't going well. It's really hard to see your strengths when you're in the middle of a place where everything feels like you can't control it, right? So it's hard to see when things are going well, it's hard to see your strengths. But when you are able to see your strengths, it shows a sense of pride and self-esteem. And so now I want to turn and talk to you a little bit about my 18-year-old who is in his first year of college right now. When the pandemic hit, he was in his senior year of high school. He also is autistic. He had just exited his individualized education program. He had met all of his goals. He was ready to go back to school and not have an IEP. And boom, everything shut down. And he couldn't see his friends. He couldn't have a prom. He couldn't have graduation. And for a lot of kids, that was really, really difficult. But for my son, Jacob, it really wasn't because he knew what he was good at. He's a photographer, he's a videographer. He actually talks about seeing the world better through the lens of a camera. So what Jacob did was decide he was going to make the best of this. And he started doing something what he called porch portraits, which is very hard to say, porch portraits. He volunteered to do a 6 feet portrait of every student in his graduating class. And he took 3 pictures of them. A picture of them, they all had senior shirts. So he took a picture of all of them on their porch in their senior shirt. So one at a time, all of the students at their own home. They were in their senior shirts. He took a picture of them in that. He took a picture of them doing what they love best. So if it was baseball, with a baseball glove and a baseball bat, if it was gymnastics, something about gymnastics, if it was a music thing, they had their guitar or their saxophone or whatever. And then if they had made a decision about what they were doing after graduation, he took a photo of them either in their college gear or their gear of what they were going to do next. And then he put each of those photos together in a composite. And for every parent in his graduating class of the students that he did this for, they all got this portrait of what those kids looked like. And so that was Jacob's strength and how he got through. He looked to his strengths as a way to really become a resilient kid. He's a young adult now. I shouldn't call him a kid anymore. A resilient kid and young adult who decided he was going to use his strengths as a way to like make it through and find some purpose for himself. So the next thing is seeing a lesson in setbacks, right? So seeing lessons in setbacks is an ability to really, give me just a moment here. I'm trying to sort through my thoughts a little bit. Seeing lessons in setbacks is learning from a problem, right? And coming up with a solution, and that's a win. And I think about my daughter, Megan, who came up with a solution and she learned from her setback in a way that made her stronger for it. It also means kids go back and try again, right? So sometimes when kids face struggles, they need to believe that they can go back, they can try again, and things can get better. And resilience, when you believe that you can go back and try again, it's a really good way to know that it's not set. There are ways to learn from your mistakes. You can try something a different way. What you tried at first doesn't mean that you've lost, you've failed. You can go back. Also, believing situations that will improve and change and skills that will improve and change is a really important thing. If your child believes that progress is possible, if you believe that progress is possible, it's a sign of resilience. So I've already talked about my 24-year-old and my 18-year-old, and now I want to tell you a little bit about my 11-year-old Benjamin. Benjamin is a super happy kid. He loves being around other kids. He loves his social situations. He loves just life. And when life has shut down for him, he wasn't sure that was going to change. It's been a long time. And in the life of an 11-year-old, a year is a very long time. And he didn't see a lot of hope. He was not seeing it. But as the vaccine has started rolling out, as other things has become more possible, he went to a 2-day-a-week hybrid. So he started going back to school just about this week. He's starting to see some hope. He's starting to see that the situation can change. And I feel like that's a sign of resilience for him. And I also think that setting new and realistic goals is really important. It's a really sign of resilience. When kids, when adults, when we all face struggles, we may lower our expectations and say, you know what, I can't do this. I'm done. I'm not even going to set that goal. For me, it was releasing books in a pandemic. I thought I had like this plan. I was going to go on the road. I was going to show everybody the books. I had to really reset that and think about, how do I do this right now? But when you set those new and realistic goals, so for me, instead of coming to Hill Learning Center, I'm here tonight. And my goal is to talk to you all through this camera and have a conversation. Instead of taking an easy way out and just saying, I'm going to wait until I can come back, I found a way to be more resilient and do this again. For Benjamin, knowing that 2 days is better than no days at school, he reset his expectations, and it shows a desire to push ahead and improve. And I think, lastly, I want to make sure that we know that nobody likes going back to something difficult and risking more disappointment and failure. But continuing to do things every day, despite feeling like it's not going well, that's resilience. It means you're not afraid to keep trying, even if the result isn't great. And I think that's all of us right now. There are days where it is really hard to keep moving through. We're doing it. You're here. We're here. We're all in this together. And we are more resilient than we think we are. So I want to talk a little bit too about the fact that just doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen magically. We don't build those skills or have those skills automatically. And certainly our kids do. Our kids do not know how to push through. They don't know how to set new goals. They don't know how to do those things. So we need to explicitly teach kids to be aware of how they're feeling in the moment, to know what's going on around them, and to know that all of that contributes to what they're feeling. And we need to teach ways for them to manage it. And I think it's really important to note that kids who have learning struggles and learning challenges are very aware of failure. They may have had many experiences where they have not done well, and they feel like if they try again and they take that risk, that they may just fail again. So we need to be able to teach them different ways to try things, different ways, and to encourage them that to look at the word as fail as a first attempt in learning. And I love that. I love that FAIL is the first attempt in learning, because failing is how you learn to do better. So how do we help kids build resilience? I think the first thing I would say, that was not a dramatic pause, by the way. I think the first thing that I would say is we need to acknowledge their feelings. Just like we need people to acknowledge our feelings and not fix them sometimes, we need to acknowledge kids' feelings. And we need to acknowledge that dealing with difficulty, dealing with disappointment is not fun. It is not a fun thing to do. Telling kids, it's not so bad, or you shouldn't feel upset, doesn't make them stronger. It doesn't help them cope. It never makes me feel better when somebody says to me, it's not that bad. It always makes me feel like saying, but it is that bad. It feels that bad to me. And what I want sometimes is just somebody to say to me, I understand that you feel bad. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So helping kids recognize and talk about their feelings, even negative ones, is a really important step to building resilience. They need to be able to talk about what they're feeling and to feel like they're not being judged for feeling negative feelings. And I think that can be hard. I think I will just state right now, my patience is a little bit less than it used to be. There are days where my brain is saying to me, you can do this, it's not that bad. Whatever noise is going on in the background, and I'm saying that right now because there are all sorts of things going on in the background in my house right now. As my child gets ready for bed and those kinds of things, my brain is saying, not a big deal. And sometimes my mouth does not follow my brain. And it says, this is a big deal. Why are you doing this? So I have to step back and say, you know what? I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling annoyed. I want you to understand that's about me. It's not about you. And you need to know that's a real feeling. And so acknowledging feelings is super important. The same way it is about talking honestly about strengths, right? Talking honestly about strengths is one way to build resilience as well. We need to help kids see and understand their strengths without overdoing it. You don't want to say you're the best at this and you're the best at that. But sometimes kids have a hard time seeing what they're good at, because sometimes those skills are not really visible. They may not be things we think about. So for example, if your child or is starting to make breakfast for themselves, even if it's just pouring a bowl of cereal and milk, that's something they're doing well. It's something they know how to do on their own. They're fending for themselves. They're becoming more independent. It's a strength. That gaining of independence is a strength. And you can point out how those strengths have helped them in the past. You were able to start making your own breakfast in the morning, and that was so independent of you. Maybe you can sit down and start your math homework without me and start thinking through how you need to solve those problems, because you can be independent, but also you can ask for help. So I think it's a matter of showing them those strengths transfer from one domain to another. And it's good to have this conversation regularly, right? Because as we grow, we get a better sense of our strengths. And during a setback, it's really important to remind people what they're good at so they can start thinking through, how do I apply this to this situation? What's the next thing I can do? I'm independent. I can think about how to solve a problem. I have a really good sense of how to get in touch with my friends right now. I can text them if I don't want to be on the phone. I can write a letter. I can wave to somebody from across the neighborhood, because I am independent and I have ways to do these kinds of things. Another way to build resilience is offering support, but don't jump in. And I think as parents and as educators, we are really good at trying to fix things. We jump to fix things before we know whether or not they need to be fixed. And I think it's important to have that conversation. Offer the support, ask the questions, Do you want me to hear you? Or do you want me to help you? Or do you want something in between? And I think asking that question to offer support is a really good start in helping kids think through their own ways of dealing with things. You can help them look for the solutions. You can encourage that behavior by offering help, but you don't have to do it for them. As I said with Megan, we brainstormed what could she say to her doctor? What did she need to say? I didn't do it for her, in part because I couldn't because she's an adult, but in part because it wasn't what she needed. What she needed was to learn how to do it herself, but she needed the scaffolding. She needed me to sort of give her the words to start having those conversations. So avoiding challenges doesn't build resilience, but working through them does. So the more support you can offer without jumping in, the more talking you can do about solutions, the more you can point to times where kids or adults have found their own solutions, the better off you're going to be. And that jumps into talking about lessons that are learned. You know, kids who learn and think differently really often need to practice finding those lessons in situations. They may know it was difficult, but they may not know that they learned something from it. You know, when you fail a math test, when you fail, if you have trouble with reading, you don't always see that the trouble you had brings you to the next level of solution, right? So we need to be able to find the lessons in situations. And some situations don't have lessons, and that's okay. But some situations do. If you talk through what was difficult, if you talked through how you and your child and your students tried to handle it, it can help them see what they can use from that challenge to make it better the next time. And I also would say, let's encourage our kids to ask for help. They need to know that struggling or failing is not a sign of weakness, and that asking for help is actually a strength. When they ask what they need for what they need to get through a situation or to do better at something, they are being strong, they are being resilient. And if you're not the person to help them, you can help them find the person who can help them. Who's the best person to talk to? You know, if you are not the person to talk to, who is the next best person they can talk to ask for help in a situation? Did they forget their homework? Is there somebody in their class they can get in touch with to find out what that homework is? Because you probably don't know what it is, but somebody does know. And knowing that it's okay to ask for help is really important in building resilience. And then I think the last thing I would say about building resilience is building confidence that things can improve, believing that things can improve with work and that you're not stuck where you are plays a really big role in resilience. And this way of thinking can be taught. We can teach people to see the little increments and see that they are baby steps to success. And take a breath because I've been talking for a very long time. I just want to take a breath. And I want to encourage you to think about how you can model resilience. And one of the things, this is great. This is linked here too, so you can see more information about it. But it's taking the 3 good things challenge. We often see things that go really badly, but we don't often see the things that go well. And so I would encourage you to take the 3 good things challenge. And the 3 good things challenge asks you each day for at least 1 week to write down 3 things that went well for you today. And if you're not a writer, you can record it on a phone. You could have somebody take a video of you. You could draw a picture. So there are multiple ways you could do this. But write down 3 things each day that went well for you and explain why they went well. Because then when you're working with your child or your students, you can say, it's not just that this went well, but I can tell you the things that went into making this go well for me. And it's a model of thinking through that you can have both good things and bad things happen in a day, and that they can happen interwoven with each other, and that you can still see how the good things happened as well as how the challenging things happened. So I love this 3 good things challenge. I think it's such a great idea. A teacher I know brought this to us and said, I've been doing this thing because it's really helped me feel better during this time. And I thought, this is amazing. I want to tell everybody about this 3 good things challenge. We now have a good things challenge jar in our house. So like at the end of a week, we can pull it out and go back and look at it and remember what happened well at the beginning of the week. You know, at the end of the week, if you're really tired and it feels like nothing went well, at the end of the week, you can go back and say, oh, wait, this went really well, and I'm going to tell you why. And it's really a cool activity to do with your children too. I also would really encourage you to challenge mindsets. So you may have heard the term growth mindset. And growth mindset is a way of sort of describing how we face challenges and setbacks. The basic idea is that people with a growth mindset believe that abilities and things can improve over time, versus somebody who has a fixed mindset thinks their abilities are set in stone and can't change. So I would say an example of that is the difference between somebody saying, I'm really having trouble learning my multiplication tables, but I'm getting there, versus I'm just bad at math and I can't do this. So that's sort of a really simplified example of growth mindset. But having that growth mindset can help us and kids reframe the challenges that we're facing. And these, I'm just going to say, I really love these worksheets. They're available and understood. They're also in the packet that you've been provided, and there are more of them too. I'm a little biased because I wrote them and I created them, but they were super fun to think through. And one of them is this, why I can do this. And it's a plan. It's a growth mindset, sort of like an action plan. And it's helping think through getting from I can't to I can try. So what I think I can't do. For me, I think I can't tell people about having OCD. I don't think I can do that. Why I think that? I think it's too scary. I'm not ready. I don't think I can talk about it with people yet. And then I move to what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that if I talk about this, people will see me differently. They will treat me differently, and I will not be the same person to them in their eyes. But why I should try is because, you know what? People might treat me differently, and it may not be a negative difference. And I might help somebody in the meantime. So why I should try to do it anyway is because it's useful, it's helpful. I may be treated differently and more positively and better understood. And so how I'm going to keep those challenges from standing in my way is I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to share this with a few friends at first to make sure that they see it and what they think about it. And then I'm going to put it out into the world. And for me, that was my plan for disclosing and writing that piece. There's an older kids version of the action plan too that you can see in your handouts. And I really think it's a great way to break down the pieces of why people are in an I can't versus an I can try place. The growth mindset questions that are here on the side, also a printout. You can put them up on your refrigerator. You can put them up in your classroom, your virtual classroom. You can put them up in your child's room, in your student, in your students' folders. And they're just a really good conversation starters to think through, what made you think hard today? How are you going to challenge yourself today? What do you want to learn? How did you work as hard as you could have? And sometimes the answer to that is no, and that's okay. But then you say, what can you do next, right? So what can you do next? What are you going to do to manage distractions, for example? If you had things that were too easy, how can you make it more challenging for yourself? What's the next challenge you're going to tackle? I wouldn't recommend asking all of these questions at the same time because it's incredibly overwhelming, but just picking one and having that conversation is super important. So how else do we build resilience? We build resilience by teaching self-regulation skills. And self-regulation is sort of what we started in the beginning of this with that breathing, right? We often do co-regulation with kids. We teach them skills and we do them with them, right? We co-regulated as we did that breathe in and breathe out. But self-regulation is about having those skills to calm down in the face of stress and anxiety by yourself. And it's a skill that develops over time and with practice, because being able to soothe yourself, being able to self-soothe is an important step to being more resilient. So let's look at a couple of ways, self-regulation skills that we can teach kids to do on their own. This one here I love is starfish breathing, and I'm going to make sure that you can hear my sound at the same time because I think this one's really cool. Starfish breathing. Let's take a look at it. Use the palm of the hand. And as you're tracing up, you're inhaling. 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 Are they happy? Some things we should do better. And I have the link there, so you can have that on hand if you would like to have it on hand, no pun intended by on hand. And I love the starfish breathing for a lot of reasons. I will tell you, these are all sort of part of a piece that I put together for Understood called 6 regulation skills, self-regulation skills for kids. And my coworkers knew the day I was working on, I was calmer than I'd ever been because I tried out all of these methods. I tried the breathing, I tried the starfish breathing, which is really neat because you can do it at your desk without anybody seeing, right? So it's unobtrusive, and you can teach kids that they can do it under their desk, that they can do it out of sight of the camera, those kinds of things. I tried all of these because I wanted to make sure the things that I was providing to people were helpful. It was the calmest day I'd ever had, and I think I need to do it almost daily. Which brought me to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. This is a printout that you can print out and just have handy. But here's the details of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. When kids are really anxious, when they're having a really hard time, grounding yourself where you are is that mindfulness bringing you back. So what we talk about is finding 5 things you can see. Right now, I can see my desk. I can see the clock. There's a water stain on my ceiling that I can see. And it doesn't matter how large or how small, finding 5 things and naming them out loud, writing them down, putting them in your head, however you need to do that. Then you move to 4 things you can feel or touch. Is it the pencil you're holding? Is it your shirt or your sweater? Is it the ground under your feet? 4 things you can feel or touch. 3 things you can hear. For me right now, it's the tick of the clock, the sound of my breathing and my talking because I hear me. And it might be the birds chirping outside. 5 things I can see, 4 things I can feel or touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell. There's coffee brewing in the other room right now. I can smell coffee. I smell hand sanitizer on my hands. Those are the kinds of things that you can, 2 things you can smell, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel or touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This one's a little difficult, but sometimes it's a matter of giving kids gum to chew or taking a sip of water. It may not be the most pleasant taste, but it's a taste it can bring you back. So this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method is another thing you can teach kids to do on their own. So here are some other self-regulation skills for kids that we can work on. Repeating an affirmation, which is an empowering statement. That's your own statement that you repeat to yourself in times of stress. For me, it's, I can only do the best I can do. I can only do the best I can do. For some people, it's, I know I can do this. For other people, it may be more personal. You may want to talk to your family, your friends, and think about what is it that you're good at? What is it you can say to yourself in times of stress, and kids too. Never underestimate the power of exercise or taking a walk to get some air as a way to self-regulate. Moving around helps with self-regulation. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, and it makes it easier for you to think clearly and get out of that sort of stress and anxiety mode. This one I like a lot. The rock or roll is just my way of making a little bit of a joke. I like rock and roll kind of thing. But when you're experiencing really strong emotions, and some of our kids in particular, they get sort of sensory overloaded. Their nervous systems go into sort of a flight or fight kind of place. And sometimes when you're feeling that strong emotion or sensory overload, just rocking or swaying can help calm your nervous system. And you can do that in a number of ways. I'm in a swivel chair right now, so I can rock and swivel. You can use an exercise ball. You can have an exercise band on your feet, a rocking chair. Just sort of like a little dance movements kind of thing can help you too. Some kids that I know, there's a big hill near the school, and so they'll roll down the hill. Not great for their clothes and grass stains, but really good for their nervous systems. If you think about it, it's that what you see when you're in a grocery store and somebody's moving a grocery cart back and forth with a baby, that rocking and rolling to calm the nervous system. The other thing you can do too is ask kids or remind them they can put their emotions into words or art. Journaling, writing about what they're feeling, drawing, or even sort of talking out loud. I do this often. I talk myself through things. It's a think aloud, right? Okay, first I just need to get up. I need to brush my teeth. Then I'm going to put on my pajamas, take off my pajamas and put on my clothes. I'm going to go sit down and eat breakfast. Oh, I have to go turn on my computer. I'm talking through the things that are stressing me out, and it helps me self-regulate. If kids have a trouble drawing what they're feeling, just use the phrase, draw what you see in your head. Sometimes it might be just a bunch of scribbles, but getting it out of the head can be super helpful. So I want to know, what self-regulation skills are you using to cope? Because you may not actually know that you've been using self-regulation skills, but I'd love to know, what kind of self-regulation skills are you using to cope this year? If you want to drop some thoughts in the chat or just think about some of them. Prayer, breathing, these are great. Walking, yoga breaths, and exercise. You guys have some great self-regulation techniques. Calming music, sitting in the hammock, visualization. They're coming in faster than I can even see. These are great. They're such great self-regulation skills. I would encourage you to look in the chat and see what other people are doing, because you might get some ideas from there as well. So I want to come back to one last resource for you, and it's a part of the packet that is with you. It's a calming strategies worksheet, and it's part of an anxiety log where you can sort of track the anxiety that you and your child are feeling throughout the day. The neat thing about this too is you can actually put it on a phone and fill it in too, so you don't have to have the paper with you. It's fillable. But what it does is it doesn't just talk about the calming strategies for your child, it talks about calming strategies for yourself too, right? So as you're thinking through what's going on in the moment, you can think through what helps ease your child's anxiety, but what's also going to help ease your anxiety. I think it's really important to realize that, like, our emotions feed off each other. When our children are overwhelmed and stressed, we take on some of that. When we are stressed and overwhelmed, they may take on some of that. So it's important for us to both, to show that we are learning strategies for ourselves and to demonstrate them. For sometimes it might be like, I need to leave the room for a minute, but I think I would say I need to leave the room for a minute to calm down. I'm going to be back. If you're teaching in a classroom, that may not work, but you can step away for a moment, not from the classroom, but from where you're standing. Counting to 10, exercising, getting more sleep, these kinds of things, tracking what it is that's going to help you calm down, as well as what's going to help your child calm down, is a really good way to start thinking through self-regulation. So these strategies, these self-regulation skills, these building resilience, it all comes together for us to be able to say, I can deal with adversity. I can deal with adversity. And so what I'm going to come back to is this question we started with. How have you dealt with adversity this year? After listening to all of these things that you can teach, that you know, are there things that you've done to deal with adversity this year that you didn't even know you were doing? You don't have to answer it now, but it's just something to think about, because I really would like you to realize how much we have in terms of skills, that you are dealing with adversity daily, that you have skills that you are using and skills you can teach, and it doesn't have to be done all at once. It can be done over time, and we're all getting there. So that's a lot of information that I just put in your direction. But I want to know if you have questions that you want to ask me, things that we can talk about. And Kathy, you let me know if you want me to stop sharing the screen, however you'd like me to do this.
Can you hear me, Amanda?
I can. Yep.
I apologize. I have no idea how to turn my video back on.
You're on. We can see you.
Okay, super, because I can't see myself, so that works nicely. So I do have some really great questions that came into the chat while you were talking, but let me say first, thank you. And without even realizing I needed it, I feel calmer after just watching and listening to your voice. So thank you. Unless you think you might want to pop back to a slide, it is up to you in terms of whether you continue to screen share or not. One of the questions that came in, you talked about your wonderful book, Adulting Made Easy. What age range is that really geared towards?
That's a great question. I am going to stop sharing. I want to make sure that we see this last slide, and I know it's in the packet too, so people understand what understood is funny to say. Understand what understood. But I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a conversation.
Okay.
The Adulting Made Easy is really designed for sort of teen and up, right?
Okay.
It deals with a lot of those skills that we don't even know that we need to know in terms of becoming an adult and learning, simple things like budgeting, those kinds of things. I would say I would start like with a 13, 14. I will say my 11-year-old's been reading it and he keeps coming back to me and saying like, Mom, I need to learn how to do this. So it may even be appropriate for younger kids as well. But it's definitely something that I would recommend for a high schooler as a graduation gift from middle school or from high school.
What a cool idea. Thank you for saying that as we enter the last quarter. That's a really great idea to graduate from middle school with this, this book that really will help you get to the other side. You've talked a lot about the 5 pillars in that resonated with me. And someone talked about the idea of applying those 5 pillars even when you're having success, that self-doubt is there, that imposter syndrome. You've mentioned times when things are going well and things aren't going well. It can be hard to see strengths from time to time. So how do you apply those 5 pillars in maybe that imposter syndrome sort of realm?
Well, I can tell you I'm doing it right now. I always have imposter syndrome. I'm always wondering if I'm like in the right place and in the right person to give advice. And I do a lot of talking out loud in my head, right? I do, it's not talking out loud if it's in my head, but I do a lot of sort of talking myself through things.
Mm-hmm.
I think as you apply those 5 pillars, thinking through where have you been confident? How do other people see you? For me, that's a really important part of thinking through those 5 pillars is taking yourself out of the situation and seeing how other people see you in the moment. Because I think the imposter syndrome is about how you see yourself and not how other people see you. If you have somebody that you trust and love and who, will be honest with you, I think you can ask them that question and say, I'm feeling really unsure about my own skills. I'm not sure I'm doing this well. Can you tell me what you're seeing? And they can become a mirror for you. And I think we can do that with kids too, is to be able to say to them, this is what I see about you right now. You may not see this about yourself, but I want you to know how I see you.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a nice lead into maybe talking about what tape is playing in your head.
Right.
Did what I say that I was seeing surprise you? What tape is playing in your head right now? Let's kind of get to the bottom of that. You talked about the growth mindset, and we had a question about modeling the growth mindset as the adult in the situation versus helping kids through their own setbacks. They mentioned, and I get this as a parent, sometimes doing both is a little overwhelming, but is that the goal, to do both, or does one result more in kids developing their own resilience?
That's a really interesting question. And I would say I don't actually have a good answer for it. I don't know the research well enough. I would echo that it is very hard as a parent. And I think that's a really good point. And I want to really stress that I think is an exceptional question. I do think the more you model growth mindset, the more kids are able to have their own kind of growth mindset, right? So in the moment, as you're teaching them, and those are the kinds of things where, I said with my 11-year-old, I adore him. He's wonderful. He never stops talking. And I'm having trouble with that right now. I'm going to be honest. I have trouble with that. And I sort of snap at him more than I'd like to.
Yeah.
And what I need to say in that moment is, I know I didn't do that well. Next time, I can do this better, and what I will do is actually come back to him and explain to him what my plan is.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I've actually seen him start doing some of that planning for himself too. We do a lot of talking about next time. And I didn't know that he was picking up that language from me until it started coming back at me, so I think the best you can do is the best you can do, right?
Yeah.
So you can either teach it or model it or do both, but either one I think is going to be successful in helping.
So you just did something that segues nicely to the next question that I was going to ask, and that is you did a little bit of that self affirmation there when you said, that the best I can do is the best I can do. Do you have a good resource for self affirmations or thoughts on how to walk a child through that?
I will actually make sure to get a resource to you after this. I have a book, but I cannot remember the title of it at the moment.
Okay, super.
But I think the self-affirmation, when you're walking through it with students or kids or whomever, is to help them think through what's short, what's going to make you feel better, right? And those are the kinds of things that are really important, is to think through, what do I need to make myself feel better in the moment? And kids don't always know. So it's, those are those moments where you can say, what I know about you is that you are really funny and you use humor as a way to get through tough moments. And so you can say, what might be a good affirmation for you is, I'm really funny and I can see the humor in situations. So it's a matter of sort of showing them what you know about them and asking them if that's something that makes them feel good about themselves. So I think it's a good start. And also sharing with them what's affirming to you, right? So my kids know that the two things that I say often are, I can only do the best I can do. Yeah. And this is a kind of a joke in our house, but the kids will say, well, I'm not trying to do it. And my answer is try not to do it. Right. So that's one in our house. We kind of talk about the difference between I'm not trying to do it and I'm trying not to do it. Yeah. So I'm trying not to do it becomes a family affirmation in our home.
Yes. I like the family affirmation idea. That's a really good idea. And a final question, how do you balance encouraging independence with your child if that is a known trigger for your child? So
trigger, and can you be more specific? And I'm sure that's like in the chat.
It induces a shutdown or a trauma response when I'm being asked to try to be more independent.
That's a really good point, and I think it's a really good question. I appreciate the question. I think that is one of those situations where you have to be really cautious and you have to know your child. And I think in those cases, scaffolding is really important. By scaffolding, I mean finding the laddering up steps. What's the smallest step towards independence that makes your child feel safe and confident? And then once they've got that, what's the next step? What's the next thing you can do and ask them to do? But I think it requires a lot of conversation if you have a conversationalist of a child, and ongoing conversations, because we know that sometimes kids are just done, right? So you can talk to them and with them, but you shouldn't talk at them. And I think those are the moments that are really important to realize that. Talk with them about, what do they know that they can do on their own, and set those small goals so you can ladder up to the bigger goals.
Yeah, we had and I think not trying to tackle too much at once is another really good strategy, to take maybe what seems like a priority move and start to think through how to. I've worked with a student several years back that had selective mutism. And so we walked through, when you talked about scaffolding, we started with just his hands would be down at his side. So I'll mimic that, but show it on the camera. And as we passed someone in the hallway, maybe between my resource room and his classroom, the goal was simply just to raise a finger, not even a full-on wave, just we started there. And just tiny little steps until we could pair a verbal with that, until we could. So I think it is just thinking about how you can really step it back down to the smallest move and then build up. And similar to what you were saying when you were helping Megan and saying, let me give you the words.
Right. And I think there's a piece of that too. What you're talking about is that like also resetting expectations, right? So what is the reason we need that communication? And is it the same reason that the child needs that communication or independence? So I think thinking through what is the end goal is super important to sort of backtrack from that. You can sort of backwards engineer why. And I think sometimes I realize as both a teacher and as a parent that my why may not be as important as I think it is if I stop and really think through. I don't know if any of the rest of you have ever had that moment as a parent where your gut reaction is you just say no. And then you stop and think and go, wait a minute, there's no reason I should have said no there. I actually am going to come back and say, actually, sure. Yeah, go ahead and have cake for breakfast. It really doesn't matter to me today.
Yeah.
So I think the end goal really matters too. Why
Yeah.
are you trying to get there?
It is. It's hard to stop sometimes when you get busy and really think about why you're doing the things
Right.
you're doing as an adult. So imagine what that's like for kids.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, I can't thank you enough. I hope you'll get a chance to peek in the chat, because the thanks and the helpful presentation, and wow, just appreciate your vulnerability and you sharing your stories with people, and you really made a difference this evening. And I know it's hard to feel that when you feel like it's you in a slide on the screen, but you had an impact tonight, and just a lot of thanks is rolling in, and I wanted you to know that.
I really appreciate that. I would love it if somebody would save the chat and I could have an opportunity to look and sort of respond, and over time I can make sure that if there are things that people really wanted answers for, I can do that, because we know how to reach each other, even though we're far apart. We all know how to reach each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. We always enjoy having you at Hill, and just hearing your voice just calms me. So I have loved spending time with you this evening. Thank you so very much for your presentation. And everyone who participated this evening, thank you for being a part of this with us. Reach out to Hill and to understood.org for any needs. We are here. Understood.org is there. And if you have never been to that site, I encourage you to go.